Hey everyone, it's Tim from Linessa Farms Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again today. So today we are interviewing Greg Christiansen from Grandview Livestock. You may know him from his YouTube channel. If you haven't checked that out yet, make sure you check out the description below. He is also an author. This is a great conversation that we had pre-recorded. This is not live, but I think it is a pretty good interview talking about a blended system that Greg uses on his farm where he raises both sheep and goats. So on his farm, we're talking about almost 900 ewes and probably 700 to 800 goats. So lots and lots of animals. Completely different situation than many of you may be used to, but I think this is valuable, especially for those of you that are considering raising large numbers of animals on pasture. Even if you raise a small number of animals on a situation like a dry lot, there's still some valuable information in here that you can glean. We're going to talk about raising on pasture. We're going to talk about fences. We're going to talk about livestock, guardian dogs, herding dogs like border collies, and all kinds of other great topics. So make sure you stay tuned to find out more. So we interview farms from all over the United States. Some of them, if they're close enough, we go out to them. But where are you located at?
In Kansas. I'm south of Kansas City, probably an hour, just right on the Kansas-Missouri border.
Okay. So weather-wise out there, are you guys kind of similar to us here in Indiana where you get some pretty cold winters and some pretty hot summers, or?
Yeah, humid.
Yeah.
It's probably similar.
So tell me a little bit about your farm.
So we do row crop farming, corn, beans, wheat. We do cover crops, no-till, and then we have the sheep and goats that we raise with them, and we graze. We have pasture, and then we also have some cover crops we graze from time to time.
How did you end up getting into sheep and goats? Were you raising sheep and goats, or was it something you got into later in life?
No, I got into about 20 years ago. I was actually training my border collie, and the guy that was showing me how to train had a few goats, and it just kind of took off from there, I guess,
Yeah, I know.
And I was doing the numbers, and I thought, man, this looks pretty good. Got to get rich raising goats. And of course, it's like everything, there's more to it once you get into it than when you're looking at it from the outside, Yeah.
So did you start off with goats and then get into sheep later, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Probably just have had sheep about 4, maybe 5 years, probably 4 to 5.
So what kind of goats are you raising?
I use Spanish bucks, Kiko bucks, mytonic bucks. So the does, like back 20 years ago when I started, you just could buy does at the sale barn. You didn't really find anybody that had very many to buy. So I just started using those bucks, and we just always kept back our own. And now we don't. I still buy a few outside bucks, but we just keep our own nannies. So there's just going to be a mixture of those. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite breed that, if you had to pick one out of the group, or they all kind of have their own positive attributes?
A Kiko goat is really a Spanish goat brought in from New Zealand or Australia. So they're kind of similar to a Spanish goat, a lot of same characteristics. The myotonic, I like those. They're muscular, but they're too short, and they faint, which is just kind of an annoyance when you're trying to gather them up and using your border collie or whatever, and and they lay down on you.
How on earth do you manage to use a border collie on fainting goats? Is it? Will they continually faint over and over and over, or do they kind of get it out of their system and then you can work them?
Yeah, they kind of, once they do it once, they probably won't do it again. The rest of the time you're breaking them up, or I don't know how long that they stop doing it. And usually if you cross them one time, a lot of them won't faint. So you'll get a few, but I don't know. I'd say maybe 1 or 2 out of 100, or very few. If you cross them one time, Takes a lot of the faint out of them.
So the Spanish goats, I don't know if I've ever talked to anybody that raises Spanish goats. I know some of our friends out in West Texas have them. For individuals that aren't familiar with the breed, what is it about the Spanish goat that makes it appealing? I've heard they tend to have a little bit more parasite resistance, but you hear that, and a lot of that depends on the genetics of the flock or the herd that they're coming from. But what has your experience been with them?
So they're going to come from Texas, a lot of them. And so anything in Texas, I mean, they don't have the parasites that we have or that you would have. So they may be more parasite resistance in their environment. They're just, they're good mothers. They usually have good bags, good udders. Parasites, I mean, it's a problem. Once you have them, any breed, and you just raise them on your place with your environment, with your parasite load, then you're going to start, the females you keep back are going to be your good ones,
Right.
That's when you kind of turn the corner.
How hard are you culling every year? Are you always culling every year? You're getting rid of some of them and replacing, or how does that look at your farm?
Like if they don't raise a kid, or I mean, of course, if they die, you don't.
Right.
If if they have a bad bag, bad teeth, those are what we call for. If they bring home a kid, I'm not particularly going to know if they had a great kid or if they had a dink, because I can't tag them all. I can't keep up with that much record keeping. If they come through, maybe say 1st of July or so, we're going to be castrating, and we're running nannies and kids through, and we give them vaccinations. And then if there's a nanny comes through that's dry, then we can call her. We know she doesn't have a kid or something happened to it. We can't keep track of things like how many times did this one get wormed versus that one. Now we look at their eyelids. We do the FOMACHA. Yeah, that one needs wormed. Yes, that one needs wormed. No, that one's fine.
Sure.
That kind of deal. It's real hard to grow your herd if you call for too many things,
Right. Are you running your sheep and goats together, or do you keep them separate?
They're together much of the time, but we do like to breed them separate. And I don't know if this is true, but I've heard the bucks might breed a ewe and maybe it would settle, but then abort. And so that would mess up your breeding season, you see.
Right.
And like I said, I don't know if that's true, but I just didn't want to take a.
We run sheep and goats together, and what I've found is that if you don't separate them out, then you've got bucks and rams fighting each other for breeding, because they'll breed them, they don't care. And so now you've got competition for breeding, and it's just a disaster. And so we do the same thing, we separate them out. So now, are yours on pasture all year round, or do you have any times where they're on a dry lot situation?
No, they're on pasture all year long. Now the kids, when we wean them, and that just depends on if there's better forage where they're at with their mom, we might leave them on into the winter. But we try to grow some forage here at home that we can bring them home to that they'll grow good on. And then when that forage is gone, we'll feed them a grain mix and a self feeder. And they're out on pasture, but it's kind of like a dry lot because there's, it's dead of winter. There's nothing out there.
Sure. Yeah, I understand.
We're feeding them the hay and the feed mix. Yeah.
Okay. And we utilize creep feeding for our little ones as well. I've crunched the numbers, and that is, as you know, that varies from year to year, commodity prices and everything else. It seems to me that when I crunch the numbers and I look at when I'm taking my kids and lambs to the sale barn, I get more bang for my buck if I put them on a feed. I know some people argue that, but I mean, I've crunched the numbers and that's what I've come up with. What does your sales look like? Are you primarily utilizing a sale barn, or are you selling to individuals, or what does that look like?
We usually just take them to a sale barn. To sell to individuals, it just would be too labor intensive. So we can load up a couple hundred on my neighbor. He's got a big trailer, and we can take them to sale. Pretty particular and kind of watch the sales every year. It seems like there's a different sale that's a little bit better than another one,
Mm-hmm.
more buyers there or something.
I agree. I personally think we get our best prices at the sale barn. You have a group of individuals that come together. You have kind of a competitive nature between them. When you factor in your time and effort, to us, it just makes more sense to take them to the sale barn. Selling to individuals, it's an unfortunate truth. People say they're going to show up and they don't show up. Yep. People come out and they want to haggle with you. And I tell people, I'm very honest with people, and I tell them, I say, hey, look, if I can sell them for more money at the sale barn than I can sell them to you here, there is no point in me selling to you directly off of my farm. And that's just business, and I really think the sale barn is the way to go. How many animals are you running right now?
I don't know, around 840 ewes and over 600 or 700 nannies.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. How many acres are you running them on total?
A lot of them are a few miles away, and some are farther away that I've got another guy who takes care of them, And it's hard to tell you how many acres that is because we have some that run. I mean, they might run on some of our crop ground part of the year. Like somebody else might have a pasture and they have the cows on it,
mm-hmm.
but they want brush control.
Right.
So we'll run them there.
We utilize our goats to clean out tree lines between our fields, all kinds of stuff, because, it's like, I've got the goats. There's no sense in me going in there and trying to clean it out, especially when the goats will eat the poison ivy and the briars and everything else, and for people that don't know, I like the goats because they'll get up on their hind legs and actually prune the tree all the way up as high as they can reach. And we've got a lot of nasty trees here. We've got hedge apple and some other stuff that you just don't want to get in there with. Now, as far as crops are concerned, are you guys primarily growing corn, soybeans, wheat? What are you growing?
Yeah, corn, soybeans, wheat. Yes.
Okay. Will you ever glean a field or chase a field of corn or something with your livestock? And does that seem to work out for you?
Yeah, we've done that. Yes.
Yeah, we've done that too with our cornfields, and it seems to work out. It seems to work out fairly well. I mean, you've always got some waste, so that works out good for us. So as far as handling, you mentioned border collie. Do you mostly handle your animals with border collies? Do you have any kind of sorting systems, or what are you doing there?
Well, yeah, we have like facilities here at home that, like an alleyway, we run them through to give shots. Yeah, we don't have a head catch. Honestly, that would be terribly slow, I would think. But,
I agree.
Because I usually have enough help, and so we can just hold them. And then we have like a 3-way sorting gate at the end of that. So whatever we're sorting off or something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, most of the time we're going to bring a herd home if they're, 6 or 7 miles away, or if they're a couple miles away, we'll drive them down the road to here to vaccinate, to castrate, to do weaning, whatever.
Yeah. So you are castrating all of your males other than the ones that you might hold back for breeding. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do, because we turn them back with the with the does, If you don't castrate them by middle of July or something, yeah, you're going to probably have problems. You're probably going to be kidding in December or January. So
right. So you purposely breed, so you're kidding and lambing in May. That's correct?
Yeah.
And when they're going to be out on pasture, that's pretty much what you got to do, right? To avoid the cold winter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to, I have kidded in March, and then late March, and then early April, and then late April, and so yeah, May works best.
What are your thoughts on mineral or nutrients, and how are you handling that with such a large number of animals?
We've done different things now. We have fed a goat mineral to the goat, sheep mineral. Actually, the goat mineral is basically just any cattle mineral you can use. I don't use any special goat mineral.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sheep mineral is just a cattle mineral I had made, and we took the copper out of it. But then here, I don't know, last few months, we've been using, you know, Steve Campbell.
I do not.
Okay. Well, yeah, you can check out, Google him. And so we're feeding a salt mix, and the objective is to get them to eat more salt than maybe they normally would to make their body alkaline, and then they can fight diseases, they can fight parasites better and things. So that's what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since the grass has come on and the brush, it's hard to get them to eat that much. You want them to eat more than they would normally consume on their own. So you put in like soybean meal or something to sweeten it up. But
Okay.
like I said, now with the forage tasting better, we're
Right.
working to get the consumption up.
Gotcha. What kind of sheep are you raising?
They're Katahdin, basically.
So you don't have to worry about shearing then, correct?
No.
You know, every farm, I think, across the United States, everyone that we talk to kind of has their own unique issues. And it usually turns out that about one thing is 90% of your problems in the year. If you had to kind of narrow it down, what do you think is the main issue that you guys deal with on your farm? Is it parasites? Is it hoof issues? What would you say it is?
Oh, it's going to probably be parasites, you know. And that's one thing I was looking at this salt mix. I mean, and we also been trying to do the apple cider vinegar. It's a little more difficult on pasture. But yeah, if we could cut that down, it's labor intensive. It's not that costly to worm an animal, but you lose production that you don't even know you had. And so, yeah, I'm sure that it's going to be parasites. And if you don't think it is, it's probably still is, you know.
I would agree, you know, and then you even have the kind of the silent carriers sometimes in the flock where their FOMANCHA may look decent, but they're just tolerating it better and they're just dumping eggs everywhere. And, you know, that can be difficult to narrow down.
Yeah.
Seems to be the same thing here in our area that we'll experience with coccidia is you'll have a couple carriers on the farm that are dumping it and you don't even know, you wouldn't know by looking at them. And so it can be difficult. As far as your area of the United States, are you kind of alone in your area as far as is the number of sheep and goats that you're raising, or do you have other individuals in your area that are kind of doing the same thing you are?
I'd say we're fairly alone. I mean, if you drove, I have a friend in Southwest Missouri that would have a large number like we do. There's probably some out in the Flint Hills. I had a friend out there, and they had a large number, but now they're dropping that enterprise sheep and goats. Yeah, and they had herders. They had, you know, lots of acres, had lots of brush. They just weren't getting the kid and lamb crop they needed to make it viable. And they'd been at it a few years.
Are you planting any kind of like warm season grasses, tough grass, Sudan, anything like that to use as feed? Do you have any experience with that?
We've done that. Sudan. This year we're planting a mix I was just working on. It has a sedan, kind of a dwarf sedan. I found that you don't want that big tall one
No.
because sheep and goats don't. They get lost in there when you try to find them. And it took 1 year to have to figure that out. A couple different kinds of millet, clovers, and we were real dry here until just this past week. And this is our wet season, but we weren't wet, and
Oh boy.
we were just planting. And normally we're trying to plant around the rains and get back in the field. Well, it was just dry. And since we planted corn in first April, you know, we just really didn't have to stop. We got a couple hundred acres left to plant, but then we did get some rain maybe about a week ago for us. But we were looking at that's why we wanted this mix, because we thought, man, we're gonna be short on forage, you know. And I imagine hay will be high again here this year. Everybody used up their reserves from last year, and we've had a dry spring up until recently. So the grass came on, but it's a lot of stem and seed head now. Yeah.
Yeah, we had I mean, I think everybody experienced it last year with Texas and those areas being so dry. you know, a lot of our round bales, a lot of guys were shipping stuff out there because they could get high dollar for it. And we live in an area here in Indiana where there's a lot of dairy farms, and a lot of the guys that used to do custom baling in smaller areas for baling have now gone to work for the dairy farms. And honestly, it's getting harder and harder to find guys that can bale for you. So it's difficult. It can be difficult. Backing up a little bit to the border collie, how many border collies are you using, and are you using them all the time?
Well, I've usually got one I'm using and one I'm training. And yeah, we also use four-wheelers to drive them, gather them up. So yeah, with the dog and one or two people in a four-wheeler. That's the one, like sheep and goats, they drive easily. They like to stay in a herd. You don't usually get a renegade like you might a cow or something that runs off and runs through fences. And
how many head of sheep and goats would you say a good trained border collie can handle?
I mean, you got to understand, I'll be out there also. I know we've done 500 with one. Like I said, they drive easy. They get used to it. What's not easy is, if you have that many with kids or lambs on them,
okay,
well, that's a different story. But it's still doable. That's not as fun to move them when they got kids and lambs on them. But you have to.
Are you using a whistle or are you using verbal commands?
Verbal commands mostly, and usually she kind of knows the play. She knows where we're going, what we're doing. Sometimes she tries to outthink me, and because we're not doing what she thinks, So, and if you have a group of 500, you're going to look at them and say, "Where's the rest of them?" Because it never looks like that many.
Yeah, that's amazing. Sometimes we'll look out on a pasture, and it'll be me and my wife, and I'll say, "How many do you think are there?" Yeah. And it's always way more than I think. It's amazing when you get them together. I agree. I think if somebody looked at a group of 500 sheep, they would probably not guess that it was that many. And when you're herding ewes or does that have kids or lambs on them, do you have to take certain precautions so ones aren't getting trampled, or what does that look like?
Yeah, no, the biggest, they don't get trampled. They just don't always stay mothered up.
Oh.
And so, you just have to take your time, and because we'll drive this one particular herd. Let's see, there's like 450 in there. We've got several pastures just a couple miles north of my house that we'll drive them down the road, which it might be a mile, it might be a half mile, might be a mile and a half to another pasture as we're rotating through those, but they're not all consecutive. You just have to take your time, and then, you get there, you sort of have to sit on them and try to get them mothered up, and it usually goes okay. If you do get a kid or two that's kind of dragging behind or getting lost, you pick him up and put him in the box on the four-wheeler.
Do you utilize any kind of livestock guardian dogs?
Yeah, we have several of those. Yes.
What breed of dog are you using?
Mostly Anatolian and crossed with an Akbash.
I'm not familiar with the Akbash. What can you tell me about that breed?
They're white, short-haired dog. Would kind of look like a white German Shepherd, maybe.
Huh.
Maybe a little leaner, not as quite as heavy built as an Anatolian.
So what does feeding your dogs look like? How do you manage feeding your livestock guardian dogs?
We have self-feeders, just the dog self-feeders, and then we build a cage around it, and then we just out of cattle panels, we'll cut a hole in the cage, and we'll teach the dog. He'll learn to jump in the cage and jump out to eat. I mean, occasionally a goat will figure it out. So, later.
Of course.
Yeah. The sheep will never jump in, of course, and in the sheep pastures, we can even put one that crawl under it, because the sheep will never crawl under it.
Right.
The goat will. And so we'll either get rid of her or put a pipe on her horns, or something.
So when time comes to utilize the border collies on the sheep and goats, is there anything you need? Do you have to pull the livestock guardian dogs? Will they look at the border collie as a predator, or what does that look like?
I take my border collie with me. Like, I'll spend time introducing them when I'm just out there, not gathering them up. Like, especially a dog I'm training, because a new dog, they would definitely think is a predator. But if I'm there with the border collie, and if they get, like to start with, I'll put the border collie on a leash or a cord where I can control it, because it's going to be the border collie that's going to cause your fight. They're going to pick
Oh,
the fight, and then
hmm.
the big dog's going to finish it, or sometimes they just walk off. I mean, they know I'm a big dog. I don't have to prove anything. It's the little dog has to prove something. As long as you kind of do that and introduce them, and then when we use the border collie to gather and to drive them, then I'm there also. Now, if the border collie, I have had issues where my guard dogs killed a gathering dog I had, but it got out there on its own. It got off the leash or where we kept it got out. And so it's partly that you're there also, and those guard dogs know you and they know what's up.
So did you get into border collies kind of as you got into sheep and goats? Did that all happen together, or did you have experience with border collies prior to getting into sheep and goats?
I know I had cattle, and I always wanted a border collie, heard how good they were, how they worked. And so, yeah, I bought a border collie, and this guy was teaching me to train border collie on. And so he had some goats there that used to train on. That's the ideally thing to train them on. I said, "Hey, get me some goats." He was going to go to sale, so he came back to the sale, and this is, like I said, 20 years ago. And he said, "Well, I couldn't get you any goats. I mean, they got really high. They're all the way up to, like, I don't know, 35 or 40, $50 a head." And he was telling me that was pretty high. And so I just got to doing the math and figuring what a goat eats and thinking, well, they have two babies every 5 months, how you start figuring this, which isn't true,
Right.
but you find out later.
Oh
Because
yeah.
that's what everybody tells you. That's oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, I
Right.
did the math and it looked like a great deal. And it is a good deal, but yeah, as you know, it's a lot of work, and it doesn't always work out like it does on paper.
Yeah, we have a lot of people that are brand new and getting into sheep and goats, and especially with goats. And some people just tell them, they're like, "Oh yeah, you just get them and you just throw them out on pasture, and they're going to have babies and everything's." And
Right.
it's not that way. I know you have an educational channel that you got into on YouTube. So tell me about that. How did the YouTube thing happen for you?
Oh, I don't know. I'd had goats and, well, even sheep. And one year I told my wife, I think I'll start a YouTube channel. I said, "Why do you want to do it? Why do you want it? One more thing." What? I said, "I don't know. I just think what we do is kind of interesting. And,
Mhm.
I like to talk about it, and made sense."
Right.
So I don't know if that was around 2 years ago, like January 1st of whatever year I just started, maybe two January 1st ago.
And we encourage people to listen to as many people as you can, within reason. Everybody's got a different farm, a different situation, different climates, different problems. I rarely talk to someone that I don't take something away.
Right.
And there's always something I learn from other people. And so we've started to reach out and talk to people all over the United States, like man, it's great with modern technology. We can sit here and talk, and because boy, the stuff that pertains to me here in Indiana is different than it is for you. And you and I raise in different styles. We raise half of the year we're on dry lot, the other half of the year we're on pasture, and so everything comes with you and I are going to, of course, have our similarities, because at the end of the day, they're still sheep and goats. But man, I try new stuff all the time. I'm always looking for the next best thing that I can try to cut my costs down, or maybe make life a little bit easier. And it's hard to find it's hard to find people that'll teach you something. A lot of people will show you stuff and they'll be like, "Hey, this is what I do," but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that you've got to learn. Uh, as far as veterinarians are concerned in your area, do you have a specific veterinarian you work with, or what, or is that kind of difficult?
It's kind of difficult, but there is a young man, and I don't know, maybe I'll put a plug in for him here. He just graduated from OSU, And now he comes up and he sonograms our ewe lambs for us. But I think he's going to start a sheep and goat veterinary consulting type of business.
Oh,
He's going to be working for a veterinary. I think he's going to live around Pea Ridge, Arkansas area. His name's Wyatt Catron, Catron, and he's got Facebook. He has Paragon Ranch, or he has also his own personal channel.
so when you have new folks that come to you and say, I'm looking at getting into sheep and/or goats, and I don't really know which one I want to do, what do you normally tell them? Would you tell someone to start off with sheep, or would you tell someone to start off with goats, and why?
Well, then I would ask them, what kind of pasture do you have? If you've got mostly grass pasture, you're going to want sheep. But if you got a lot of brush or a mixture of brush and grass, and you're wanting to get rid of that brush, buckbrush and locust trees and multiflora rose, goats do an excellent job at that. But if you just got grass, that's why we went with some sheep. We got into sheep is the place we had goats, the brush was gone. So it was good sheep pasture.
Right.
And then we moved the goats to other places that had brush. So yeah, as far as do they make more money than the other? The goats might sell for a little more per pound, but they're going to weigh less. They're going to dollar up about the same.
I agree. We're in the same. That was kind of what intrigued me about talking with you. Is you're one of the first people I've talked to that raises both sheep and goats like we do. And I think there's a few things, and you just brought up one of the key points. I think a lot of times people will look at sale-born prices of goats versus sale-born prices of lambs, and they'll say, oh, well, I can make a lot more money with these kids than I can with the lambs. But what they don't realize is the speed and rate of growth, and what is, if you put them side by side for the same amount of time, when you look at the weight, it about comes out, and you'll have ebbs and flows throughout the year, but it about comes out the same, at least in our area. The other thing that I know that a lot of people don't know is if you have two pastures and you put all sheep in one pasture and all goats in another, and you look at the grass and everything, it looks a heck of a lot different after a few weeks to see of how they eat and how they eat differently. I really think they complement each other well. We've got a lot of taller, stemmier grasses. We've got legumes and stuff like that. And we can get a nice clean field with sheep and goats together, where I don't feel we get that when we're running one versus the other. Anything you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, well, so we have a group of sheep. They were on some pastures that used to be goat pastures, but then the brush started coming back with just the sheep grazing them. And so, yeah, we put some goats with them. And because, the brush, it doesn't go away. It just gets smaller,
Yeah.
So, yeah, it works good.
Yeah, we see it. We have cottonwood trees really bad here in Indiana. And man, if you have just sheep on the pasture, you'll look out there and you'll see starters of cottonwood trees everywhere, where the goats will just go to town on them. So yeah, it's interesting. Tell me about fencing. What kind of fencing are you guys using?
Okay, so, and this is probably be interesting to some of your listeners. So when we're putting them on other people's pasture, places we don't pay rent for, or we don't own, so we put a single hot wire around the perimeter, like where their cow fence is, like a 4-wire barbed wire fence. And it doesn't even have to be a good 4-wire. You can have a fence that won't hold a cow, and you can put that around it, and we don't have any issues with sheep or goats getting out. But now we're not crowding them on those situations. So there is one pasture we've got, around 460 mixed ewes and goats there. And so the perimeter, it's an 80 split in 240s. So yeah, and then we're rotating, and we're using something called a smart fence. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
Okay, this is made by Gallagher. It's 4 poly wires with the post and a reel that reels or lets it in and out all 4 wires at once. We've tried the netting a few times. With bigger herds, it's just pretty cumbersome and time consuming. So we do the smart fence, but on, part of that, when we are crowding them and moving them every day or maybe 2, they're up against that single hot wire that's in front of the barbed wire, in front of it, maybe, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches and probably boot top high. Honestly, there's sometimes we're grazing a cover crop. I don't know how they stay in. We don't have, because they're born around it, they're raised around it.
Mm-hmm.
The dogs stay in. Sometimes we just disconnect the bottom wire because there's forage growing up on it, trying to, short it out. And
right.
But they don't know that, So
right.
I don't know if it's just because they're born and raised around it. We probably get by. People look at our fence and, how does that work for you? I said, well, I don't know. It just does. And
and I think you hit on 2 key points. One is they're born and raised around it, and 2 is you're not starving them out. So
right.
They don't have the drive to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, if you put a goat in somewhere and it's dry lot, or if there ain't feed and there's feed on the other side of that fence, I don't care. I don't care what it is. Like they're gonna try. And boy, goats can jump, and they'll just make a mess. So I think that's a big part of it. I'm really impressed about the dogs. That was going to be my follow-up question, was does it hold the dogs? But we raise our Great Pyrenees. We have some outside right now that are 6 weeks old, 7 weeks old, and they've been with these animals since they were old enough to open their eyes. And so they think that's where they belong. They don't think they belong somewhere else. They think they're part of the group. So I think that helps out a lot too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to fence a dog in. He's just got to have to want to stay with them.
What kind of predators do you guys have out there?
Mostly coyotes. I'm sure we have maybe a mountain lion that comes through occasionally, bobcats and stuff, but coyotes are going to be our biggest problem, and probably domestic dogs too.
Boy, domestic dogs are just a nightmare. I don't think people talk about predators, but boy, I'll tell you what, if you get a domestic dog in there, I personally think they do way more damage, because it seems to me like a domestic dog will come in there and just start killing them just for the sport of killing them, where a coyote will come in, get one, and get out usually. So yeah, that's a huge issue. And it's amazing to me, the livestock guardian dogs. Boy, we bring our dogs out there. We'll bring our border collie out there, and it's like they just know. They're just like, they know when something belongs there and when something doesn't. So you guys are you lambing and kidding right now, or are you getting ready to?
We've been lambing and kidding, since about the 1st of May. The first cycle, those bucks and rams must be really busy, because you'll get most of them within the first 2 or 3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
So we're hitting the tail end of it, but we still get several a day. But
what are you vaccinating for on your farm?
So we vaccinate for C, D, and T.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was using a pneumonia vaccine. We were still getting pneumonia. So I asked a vet or something somewhere, and they were talking about a product called Endovac. Okay, it's actually for beef. It's called Endovac beef, and they have one for dairy. But it boosts the immune system. When I talked to the company rep, and he said to give 1 cc for a sheep or goat.
At what age are you giving that to them?
Okay, we give 1 shot when we castrate them, just because we got them up.
Right.
And then we give a booster shot when we wean them, because we got them up again. And we, if we're having some kind of problems there around, December, we don't sell. We'll sell a few in December. Our biggest sale time is going to be January, February, maybe March is your best market. And so if we're having some issues, we'll go through and give it again. We might, if we're having to doctor several, we'll give it to the one we're doctoring, just to boost his immunity. Do I know that it works? I don't know.
Does it work for you? I mean, at the end of the day, right? That's what matters. You know what I mean?
Sometimes, it's only 83 cents, but then you take that times 1,000 and you're just kind of become some monies. But
right.
Then you do it a couple of times, and then we We also do the ewes and the nannies probably, I don't know, 1 to 2 months before they give birth. We'll
Sure.
give that same round of vaccination just to booster them.
Sure. Sure. Well, and and we're always trying new things. You and I are very similar. At one point in time, I was vaccinated for pneumonia. I just didn't feel like it was working for me. I didn't see really any difference. And so I just said, wow, I'm giving this and I'm not seeing any results. So we gave that up. We recently, within the last 2 years now, we started giving multi-min 90 to our goats, which is another cattle. But the issue that we run into, especially in a dry lot situation, is we got sheep and goats together, and it's like, okay, how do I get the goats copper, but I can't give copper to the sheep? And so the answer we found with that is the multi-min 90. They are not happy when they get that shot. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but oh, buddy. But
Yeah,
it
we use it some, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll use it off and on.
Right.
If when you're having a problem, you'll do anything.
Right.
You'll try something.
Right.
So,
yeah. We have a lot of people that we get a lot of emergency calls. People get into this with great intentions and they say, I'm not going to use worm, or I'm not going to use antibiotics. And then they call us and they say, my animals are dying. What do I do? And, I don't like it. I mean, hell, I don't like spending the money. I don't want to give it to them from a dollar and cents standpoint, let alone, I don't want to give it to them if I don't have to, but
yeah.
There's a time and a place for everything. And if you're going to get into this, I think reasonably speaking, you're going to have to either come to the conclusion that you're either going to have to let them die, or you're going to have to make the determination that there are going to be some times where you might have to give medications.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're, in that one group of views I was telling you about, we're doing a more intense kind of a rotation than we've ever done before.
Right.
We've ever done. But yeah, if we can work through that parasite issue, if that helps us, which I'm sure it will also help the guard dogs be able to guard, because they're in a 3 to 4 acre place instead of 80 acres.
Right.
Hitting or lambing there. So yeah, we're hopeful for that, but that's labor. It's more labor. It's more cost.
And there are some questions that just don't have an answer.
Yeah.
People will ask me, well, how many animals can I have on a certain number of acres? And I say, there is no answer. Where are you located? What does your forage look like? What kind of animals? What breed? And so I think there's a certain amount of, you just have to learn from trial and error on your farm what works specifically for you. If you have people that want breeding stock, do you guys sell any breeding stock off the farm, or usually you don't do that?
Yeah, we have. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if people wanted to contact you to get breeding stock, if they were looking to get into Katahdins, what time of year would you advise them to contact you?
January, February, we're making that determination. We'll sonogram our ewe lambs, and that way we could, if we need to sell any on the meat market, they're still under a year old. But what we found is, even if they're open, and we don't know that they're open because they're still with the rams when he comes, they're either going to be late bred, or open. But they still sell for breeding stock, just because, one thing, the way we raise them, people want to raise them out on pasture. And that's why I always say, buy from somebody that raises them the way you want to. Don't take my stock and put them in a dry lot, because they're not going to work very good for you.
Yep. That is a very important point, and we've said that many a times too. You got to get it. I tell people, find the closest person to you that you can that raises livestock in the way that you raise it. Man, I've had people call me that bought club lambs and tried to throw them out on pasture. I've had people call me that bought pasture animals and tried to throw them in dry lot. And you're going to have a headache. So I think if you can find people that are doing as close to what you want to do, the best. Plus, then you always have that resource to where when you start seeing things they're probably going to be your best resource to contact, because chances are they've seen it before or dealt with it before. So, well, you and I could probably talk for 2 hours, but or more. But I will. We'll wrap it up now for now. But I'd love to talk to you again in the future. If someone wants to contact you, what is your preferred method that they contact you? Through email or online or?
Probably email, and I have a website.
Okay, what's that?
Livestock. It's grandviewlivestock.com. My email is on that website. Okay. There's also my home phone number that I return calls. I don't normally give my cell number out just because I got to run a business and
sure,
but yeah. I have before, and but email's a good place to start. And I'll get, and I don't know if you know this, I have a book also.
Oh, I did not know that.
Raising meat goats on a commercial operation.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and you can get it off the website. You can get it off Amazon. It's just what it says, raising it for a commercial operation. It's not. It doesn't tell you how to trim a goat's hair for the 4-H show or
right.
Something. I don't know how to do that, but I just know what we do, and that works for us. And it may or may not help you,
but I think kind of what we talked about, right? It's the more information you can get. And sometimes I get information that may not be applicable to my farm, or maybe I can alter it a little to make it more applicable. But there's always something to learn, as long as you're willing to look for the people to learn from. There's always info out there. And boy, things change, don't they? Sometimes I look at things that I did 2 years ago. That's the magic of YouTube, is I'll look at something I did 2 years ago and I'll think, I don't do that anymore, or maybe I've changed that. So, right. It happens. Well, I will put all of the contact information for you, your YouTube channel, and your book in the description below on the video. All right, my friend. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your time. And I'll talk to you again soon. And